just waiting for this to show me properly. Okay. I think streaming. Okay, using a different browser, so it's maybe different. Okay. So yeah, I've got it on that chat too. Right. So I doubt anybody is going to be here while it's streaming. It's sort of a spontaneous thing of, there's this phenomenon that I keep seeing, and I woke up this morning, still in eastern Mexico, Lyon. Just woke up with this kind of a sense of clearness. And yeah, this is something I want to speak to. So I'm hopping on. And they'll, if you, when you watch this on the replay, feel free to say hi. So I want to talk about memory. It's kind of a strange thing to talk about. Why is memory the hot topic? Is it relevant? Well, I mean, it's always relevant. It's always the backdrop of what we're dealing with. But we don't notice because we're forgetful. So a few days ago, there was the slap heard round the world. Okay, so Will Smith slaps Chris Rock and everybody gets super excited. So you could give me an indication. See if I can get it to stop. Right, so a couple of days ago, like this happened in the evening, and then the next morning, my Twitter feed is just coated. People suddenly talking about standards of masculinity and what we're allowing for, what kinds of things we're encouraging. Are we encouraging violence? And, but it's understandable, blah, 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 and everybody gives their opinion. That part, like there's a part of that feels really good and important. But where my attention goes is right now, the attention is fading. Do you think we're going to still be talking about this whole incident in a week? Like some people will, but I mean the we. Will the we talk about it? Will the we still be talking about it? If you view the we as a collective entity, it's not exactly a coherent entity, but there's still something there. And you can feel this, you can notice it. Do you expect your social media to still be coded about talking about Will Smith? If it is, do you think it's going to be digging into the discussion of what do we as a culture want to do and be like? How do we want to orient to masculinity and to the kind of role that that men can play in their relationships and in culture? How we want to relate to comedians? Do you think we're really going to get into that? My guess is a week from now, it's going to be funny memes. We'll remember, but we'll remember in a way that reinforces decisions that we've basically already made. And right now, the conversation is pretty much done. People have decided what they think. Now, the thing to notice here, and I'm going to give a lot more examples than just this incident. This is the electric thing, which is part of my point. There's something about this electricity that we're addicted to as a collective, and it's part of why we are heading towards everyone dying. Like I don't. A part of me loves the thrill of the drama. Like, there's an honest thing where we don't have time anymore. This isn't about thrills. This is about looking at reality and taking honest responsibility. So I'm pointing at this because I'm doing my best to take responsibility for this. And I really want to encourage anybody else who can hear this to please pay attention right here. Everybody has an angle on what it means for us to mature as a species that needs to be heard, it needs to be added. I don't mean that I have the perspective, but I definitely have a major one. We all have major ones, but I have one that I can speak to that I think the world could be ready for. So I'm going to keep speaking to this. This is like a yet another stab. Okay. So but to come back to this thing with Will Smith and Slack heard around the world. An important question here is, do you think the conversation is dying away because we've come to consensus? I think obviously not. It's obvious that we don't collectively understand. There isn't, like, the we does not understand. The we is fragmented. The we started the conversation and then split, like we have with almost everything else in recent times. In longer times too, but it's so much more acute right now when we can see the whole thing. The internet gives us the capacity to see more facets, not even most of them, but we can see a lot more now. Those of us who are online and seeing all these different the tribes of the global mimetic war. So, or the culture wars. So, if you really feel into this, can you feel like this is not just something to understand. This isn't just a mental thing. If you make it just a mental thing, your mind will babble. And you'll have opinions, but the opinions will be inherited and they'll be based on exposure. What do I think about the whole situation with Will Smith and Chris Rock? Does it matter? I don't mean ignore it. I don't mean, why are we talking about this? In some sense, I mean, why aren't we? It can be a little confusing. Certainly looks like we're talking about it. We're having this conversation. But I think we are mimicking the conversation right now. We're not actually having it. It's related to the fact that this Slack was so sensational. It was so exciting. And now the excitement is dying down. And so our attention moves on. What do you think the next big thing is going to be? What's the next flash? Do you remember the last one? The last big thing that exploded on the scale of the internet? The Russian invasion of the Ukraine. The threat of war. A lot of people are still worrying and talking about it. But do you notice how the conversation has already started to move? Even though the war is currently ongoing, the attention has moved on. Such that Will Smith slapping Chris Rock can feel so significant. Yeah. Like, if you actually believe in the danger of nuclear war, the possibility that nukes could get launched and we could actually end civilization. And depending on what model you believe in, perhaps all human scale life. If you actually believe that, not just you can visualize it and that panics your body and you freak out and you forget you're looking at a screen. But actual concern, embodied concern, if you're actually holding back, then the feeling should be of the whole thing with Will Smith should feel a little bit like your house is under siege. You have a bunch of bandits with guns outside your house and you've barricaded the door and the windows. And then one of your teenagers starts complaining, hey, these people didn't like my post on social media. Or, hey, this person made a mean comment to me. Right? There's something about this matters, there's distress here. If you actually feel care for your child, your teenage child, then there's a turning to, and they're like, there's something to address here. But there's also an element of, why are you doing this? This is not relevant right now. And then there's a second rhythm, which our culture is not mature enough yet to recognize is what good parenting is made of. But a sort of recognition of, this is not appropriate right now. I care about your issue. We're going to set this aside. I am concerned about what is going on for you, such that you can't be in contact with the truth of the bandits. There's a sobriety to looking at the real issue. And that's if you believe the bandits are an issue. That's real. So the same thing is true here. What is so enthralling about these questions of masculinity and what's implied here that we're not finishing the conversation for? We're happy to leave it with people are disagreeing and there's lots of heat about it. And this is adding to the whole thing about what is the role of men and what's appropriate for humor and yada, yada. Like we'll continue to pretend to talk about it, but it's actually starting to seep into the same background thrum of the conversations we were already pretending to have, but is actually more like a power struggle, like toddlers yanking on each other's toys, saying, mine, mine. But the bandits, what about the bandits? Missing some context. It's not a condemnation, it's just true. So I want to make a distinction here that I think will be easier on egos listening to this. And unfortunately, the word ego, we talk about egos, and I can put a bit of the energy in there. So it's a piece that I still need to clean up in itself. I don't mean something derogatory in this case. I mean it as just a description. There's an interface that we use in order to talk to one another, to interact with the world. The consciousness needs in order to be located inside of an individual and to converse and to use the mind. I am a huge proponent of the mind. I think that it is an incredible tool. I see it as an incredible tool. It can be a source of tremendous distraction instead of a source of kindness, a channel of kindness. So I'll say something that I imagine will make this easier for you guys. This is a distinction that will make it easier to think about and easier to receive what I'm talking about. I do not mean, why aren't you doing different? There's a part of me that's angry and scared. And that may be coming through a little bit here. It's part of my own work, part of my own maturity, my own grounding, my embodiment, my taking reality seriously, to say that is my work, not to never express it, not to show it, but to not weaponize it. I don't need to weaponize it to people. But I think I'm doing an okay job. There's a bit of, but some of this is wake up. Wake up. Not a condemnation. I'm saying, hi, if you're listening to this and you're resonating with some of what I'm saying, I'm inviting you to something that I think you really want to attend to. This is important. You know this, you don't need me to point it out in some sense, but I currently hold a piece of being awake that doesn't seem to be very common. It's just a quirky attribute of this particular interface right now. It says because this interface is better, it's just true right now. So the distinction I want to offer is I am talking about the forgetfulness of the we. Think of the we as an entity. I'm talking about a being. The human race is forgetful. We is forgetful. Terrible grammar in some sense, but it's guiding towards, like, I want you to feel this, to recognize this. This is, we are in some sense giving birth to, or raising, I think it's already been born, but we're raising and caring for this huge toddler who's having a meltdown, scattered, is traumatized. Okay? What I'm pointing out right now is the way that this very young being is operating right now, the way that toddlers have the attention span of a goldfish, the way that you see the same kind of thing in really elderly people who have Alzheimer's. There's a particular kind of lucidity that's missing in we. We doesn't have this yet. And we is at risk of dying from this. Right? You cannot change that on your own. We has to decide to change that. But only individuals like you can hear this message. I am only an individual. In some sense, because I'm broadcasting to many people, and I'm hoping many people will hear this. I'm hoping we will hear this. Obviously, this particular video is carefully crafted in order to send out a missive that I hope goes viral and captures the attention of the entire human race. I don't know how to do that. It's not up to me. So I'm going to be saying this many times in different ways. Maybe in the same way, a whole lot, because there's a very simple thing that I want. I say it's simple, but it's simple the way love one another, practice loving others and loving yourself, the way that that's simple. But it doesn't mean it's doable. There is something simple that I want to highlight. And it doesn't mean it's doable, but it helps to see it. So what I'm hoping you get, what I'm hoping individuals who listen to this get, is not, this is what we should do. Like if you're watching a toddler, like imagine, like right now, we is like a toddler who's prone to hissy fits and easy distraction, who has a handgun. Highly dangerous, hard to physically approach. So if we're watching this child, we think, what should this child do? That's nuts. What do you mean, what should the child do? What the hell is that thinking supposed to do? Maybe you get it exactly right and you see exactly what the toddler should do. Now what? try to convince the kid, but they're not in a state to listen. Now, this example is a little tricky because there's a physical intuition that is correct in the literal scenario of if you are dealing with a child who has something dangerous. Most people would sit back and go, oh, what should the child do? Most people, like I don't know about most people, but there's a capacity to run forward and physically overpower the toddler. This is one of the big reasons why you don't get big and strong until puberty. A lot of the learning happens when you're small, so that when you decide, I super want X, it's possible for adults to notice that's going to kill you or other people. So you're not going to do that because I'm bigger than you and I can stop you. I have power you don't. This is why teenagers are so difficult. It has nothing to do with teenagers being difficult. It's about treating teenagers like children when they have bodies of basically adults and you can't overpower them anymore. That's the basic issue. It has to do with respect and our understanding of how to cultivate maturity in individuals. The we does not know how to create maturity in individuals, and the we's hissy fits tend to move towards encouraging immaturity and traumatization. It's part of why we're here, part of why there's even a need for me to do this live stream. In the actual scenario, we is too big and strong. You can't overpower me. We also doesn't know how to listen. And each of us do not really know how to talk to me. Something feels so funny about naming the collective we. It reminds me of the Nintendo Wii. Seems a little funny. So the thing is that we is made up of each of us collectively. Hi, Christy. Good morning. So in terms of hearing what I'm saying, I'm going to get back to this point about forgetfulness, because this is incredibly central. The thing that I want you to hear is not, this is what we should do, and therefore you should blah, blah, blah. I'm wanting to point out something true about how we works. How we work, how we works. And then I think it'll be clearer what you could do and what is your responsibility. And I don't mean this as a, like, I'm going to tell you what you're responsible for. I kind of am, but this is not it's not an imposition. I don't mean it as, this is what you're morally required to do. To me, there isn't a word for the kind of thing that I mean when I'm talking about responsibility. The word responsibility is as close as I can get. This to me is a description of something real. It's not it's something objective. So please hear what I'm talking about in terms of the collective as look at this. The looking is important. It doesn't mean you need to do something particular about it. I'll talk about what I think is really helpful for individuals to do if they choose to. The thing to notice here, this fuzziness, this forgetfulness. I want to highlight a couple of others here. Do you notice how we're moving on from the pandemic? In large part because the war started. It's not like the war got rid of the virus or anything. There's a kind of shifting that's happening, a shifting of attention. It's slow, like it'll take a while, but like in the same way of, well, do you think we're still going to be talking about Will Smith in a deep way in a week? Do you think we're going to be really reflecting on the pandemic in a year? is it going to be more like some historical event that sometimes comes up every now and then? Do you think that as a society, a year from now, we're still going to be talking seriously about how to make our supply chains robust against other disruptions, like another possible pandemic? Maybe coincidentally, but if it happens, it'll be because we've gotten thrilled with something else. Like maybe it turns out that the same things that are required for preparing for another pandemic are also useful for dealing with the potential for nuclear war. So the threat of nuclear war gets us all excited, and then we talk about that for a little while. Although you might notice, like I mentioned earlier, we're like the conversation of, oh God, are we all going to die in nuclear fire? It's already dying down, and it's becoming a little more normal for there to be a war going on. It's not sensational the way that the Will Smith, Chris Rock slap. It's this forgetfulness. Do you remember the Canadian trucker convoy? Do you remember how many people freaked out about Justin Trudeau invoking I forget what it's called, but something like the Emergencies Act that let him control the finances of a whole bunch of people, individuals? A lot of people freaked out about this. Where's the conversation? Did we finish it? Did we resolve it? Did we decide it's okay for him to have that kind of power? It's okay for us to be in a world where governments and major companies have that kind of power? I don't think we finished that conversation either. We started it, we freaked out about it. Some people are saying this is terrifying. Why should the governments be able to do that? And others are saying, well, this is a reasonable action because these people, the people doing these protests, in some sense deserved it. We didn't finish that conversation. We just kind of moved on because there wasn't something exciting going on. Party's over. What's next? You remember the concerns that floated around about, was the election of President Biden, was there, I forget the term for this, but was there corruption in the voting process? Was it a rigged election? Or partially rigged? Was there cheating? We didn't really finish that conversation. People just got into camps, asserted at each other, and then once we found an equilibrium of us versus them, we moved on. Did we finish talking about police brutality against Black people? I notice we're not talking about that basically at all. Racism has now become this abstraction of, well, we have to, like, we're now focusing on representation in Hollywood and whether that representation is terrible or not, and whether the people who are saying that it's terrible are themselves terrible. Rah, 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 that's kind of exciting. You find this in some corners of the internet. No, but instead the conversation has moved on from being about racism to mostly trans rights. Right? I'm speaking from my bubble. Maybe your bubble is different, but this is curious, isn't it? With DeSantis signing this thing into legislation, blocking teaching, I don't know how to refer to it, but I don't know whether woke philosophy would describe itself as woke philosophy. So I don't mean something derogatory to what people care about by saying that. I just don't know a term that's neutral here. But basically trying to block woke philosophy from getting into K-3 education. That's sensational. So now we can talk about that. That's where the conversation on racism led, from George Floyd. We aren't even using the name George Floyd anymore. Is that because we stopped caring? Is it because we resolved whether that situation was okay? No, we didn't finish the conversation. We moved on to the next sensational thing. Do you remember Me Too? Have we sorted out sexual violence against women? Did we just reach a new equilibrium where there isn't something exciting to focus on anymore? And so we moved on. I'm just grabbing examples from the last handful of years. This is within easy living memory. Easy living memory. Right? Last six years, 6 or 7 years. Right? So this is what I mean by collective forgetfulness. Like, we can name these things and we go, oh yeah, that happened. But where is the interest? Where is the sober desire to have a conversation to completion? It's not here. We isn't having this conversation. So there's this old adage many people are happy to try out, usually with some reference to Nazism. I don't know what's with the obsession with Nazi. I do know what's with the obsession in terms of people's wanting to refer to it, but it's like, hey, look, I get free points by comparing the thing that I hate or the thing that I fear to Nazis. Great. The quote I'm thinking of is, those who are ignorant of history are doomed to repeat it. This is very personal. This is something that if you pay attention in your own personal life, you can notice. It's hard to pay attention this way because the processes that make you forget make it hard for you to collect the data to notice this. But one of my favorite examples is having the experience of dating the same problem in different people. You keep having the same relationship problems with different people. Some of these are just endemic in the culture, but if you have relationship problems that are not identical to everybody else's relationship problems, and you keep having the same relationship problem with different people, this means that some combination of whom you're picking for a partner and what you're bringing to the relationship is recreating the same issues. But if your subjective experience is that the reason you're having this problem is because of these details in this relationship, and you're not referring to the way that you were experiencing this same scenario in your previous relationships, then when this one fails and you go on to the next one, you're going to bring the same selection process for a partner and the same issues into that relationship, which means you're going to have the same problem, including the forgetfulness. Only now you'll be older and more tired. You'll have fewer resources. After a while, this will break you down. That's just how it works. It's not some vague mystical principle. This is how anything works. This is how reality is. You can notice the same thing even within a relationship. If you keep having the same argument with your partner over and over again, or you keep ending up in the same configuration. Like I just ended one of these patterns in myself with respect to my most recent ex, who, like, we're We're still living together. We have been since our breakup around New Year's. Because we've learned how to lean into the kind of truth and maturity that's needed to really sort out, hey, we're caught in a time loop. We're caught in forgetfulness here. For me, there was a recurringness of us being long distance. And I won't go into the whole thing, but like we were a long distance relationship where the idea of us getting together soon seemed good, and it kept not happening. And there would be this kind of emotional distance. And like there's lots of structures like that I would come up with different ways to navigate it, and she would come up with different ways to navigate it, but we would keep recreating the same scenario. The issue is not that we weren't trying hard enough. The issue is that we weren't paying attention to the history that we were embodying, and that had already happened to each of us and to the two of us. So we kept recreating the same thing over and over and over again. What resolved it was not determination and problem solving. What resolved it was lucid awareness of the pattern we're in. We remember. We could see we've had this argument 4 times. The last time we had this argument, we noticed we had it 3 times, and we tried to do something to change it, and it didn't work because here we are again. The way that we're trying to resolve it feels the same. Same, same, same. Are you feeling this? This sensationalism slappered around the world. The reason that captures our attention is because we is traumatized. We is shattered. We is terrified and reactive, and is using distractions. I made a video. I think you can find it on YouTube. I'd love to put it up there. But it's also a Facebook live stream. You can dig it, find it there. But about how addictions aren't really to something. You're not addicted to alcohol. You're not addicted to porn. You're not addicted to sex. You're not addicted to cocaine. Those are distractions. You're addicted from something you don't want to experience. You don't, and I say don't want to, not like it's a failure of character. It's just a fact. Like if you don't have the living capacity to be with a feeling, an energy, an intensity that is in you, but you can distract yourself by binge eating, overeating, or over exercising. You can create a bunch of sensation that pulls your attention in. Then you don't have to pay attention to this sensation in your body that arises, the sense of inadequacy or self-hatred or fear, the internalized sense from when you were a toddler of when your parents yelled at you because you were curious about something and you didn't understand why. Now everything about authority and curiosity is scary, and you just took that into your body before you could think clearly. And now that's in you. And when it arises, you notice that if you go and you eat something fatty, heavy, or starchy, or you have sugar, it's very sensational. It distracts you. That relieves the anxiety that you don't know how to hold and the adults aren't holding for you. So you keep going through this distraction every time the anxiety arises. That's addiction. It's addiction from. You can tell because if you stop cold turkey, you find you gravitate towards other vices, other distractions, right? Or you can't stop. That's why it's hard. It's because you haven't built the capacity, the embodied capacity to be with that sensation. It's not a failure. It's just a description of what you have learned to do with your body, with your nervous system. The same thing is happening with the we, the collective. The collective does not have the embodied capacity to hold the pain of the individuals in it, to hold the implications of if a virus gets out, our food breaks down. People could starve. That's terrifying. We don't know how to deal with war. We sort of have this weird pseudo peace thing based on nukes being intense, but now Putin's pointing out, hey, guess what? Somebody can just choose to go to war anyway. This is very confronting. We're now in a different kind of era, kind of. We're not finishing the conversation because that's really sensational. It's like an awesome TV show. And now we've gotten through the action scene, which is kind of funny because we're in the middle of the action scene in some sense. But a lot of people are, the collective attention is sort of fuzzing out a bit because the intensity of what we are currently alive to is too much for we to handle. We doesn't have the embodied capacity to do this for us. And one of two things will happen going forward. Either we keep going down this road and we dies. Civilization ends. We go through something like the collapse of Rome. There's fragmentation. We end up with breakdown in supply chains, possibly something like nuclear war. Someone invents AI, is smarter than humans and destroys all human life. There are lots of ways that this could end, lots of ways that we could die. But it's overdetermined that if we keep going down this pathway, we're going to find something. We is going to find something. We is kind of suicidal at this point. Or we cultivates capacity. Starts taking responsibility for the world and for itself and for each of its parts, each of us. And when we talk about things like racism, instead of it being this hot thing about what we should do, what you're required to do, practice your anti-racism. Anti-racism is a toxic philosophy. Oh, okay. You feel the sensationalism? It's not sensation is bad. I'm highlighting we're drunk. We is drunk. We is high. We is an addict on the brink of suicide. You can see this in the amount that we's mind is shattered. There's no memory. There's a remembering of facts, but that's different from an embodied remembrance of what matters. So this has gone on long enough. If you've either gotten this point or you haven't by now. So I want to name a little bit, just very briefly, because I can feel my energy has the sense of an arc. I'm reaching the end. So let me just put in a last bit. I'm talking like, great, so you see all this stuff about we. And I'm speaking to how talking about what we should do is absurd. It's just a matter of looking at the truth. So what does that mean in terms of you? And me, like I can talk about me, if that's easier to hear. So I don't mean to point fingers and say, this is what you should do. I don't know. I can see some things that I imagine could work if lots of people were to do them, but I can't control lots of people. I mostly can't control even this human. I can do a little bit, I can move these fingers. I'm learning to hold responsibility more and more fully in a more deeply embodied way for this human. I'm learning to extend that responsibility into this human's environment. But it's up to you what you do. The law is freedom. But I want to paint something that I think if you see this clearly, I think you'll want to do. I think most people will want to do, but you're not most people, you're you. So hear this however you hear it. We is made up of us. So the way we becomes lucid is by each of us becoming lucid in connection with one another. That's it. If that happens, we cultivates the capacity to move all of this energy, and we can actually address racism. We can actually address the pains and traumas and fears of trans folk. We can actually address war. We can actually address the chaos of big tech takeover or whatever. Because we can have a conversation and stay with it as long as it matters, rather than focusing on the sensational freakout that lets we be distracted from its pain. We can hold itself by each of us holding ourselves and our connections. Okay. So if you can see this clearly, it becomes much more obvious how yelling at people on the internet about one opinion or the other about the slap heard around the world doesn't matter. If anything, if it matters by feeding the addiction, by getting into and feeling the excitement. The excitement doesn't just happen to some abstract entity, we, it happens in each of our bodies. To the extent that you got thrilled, wow, Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. Oh, that was so inappropriate, but exciting. Wow. Excuse me. To the extent that you felt that in your body and that you got wrapped up in it and became disembodied yourself, if you lost track of your toes, the feeling of your feet on the ground, if you forgot you were looking at a screen while watching video, that is your share of we. It's what's in your body and the ways in which you avoid being in your body. That's it. So if you want to cultivate clarity in your life and contributing to the we, this is where to focus. Of course, you can't control whether anybody else does this. You can only choose whether or not you're going to bring attention to your embodiment. Whether you are going to feel the things in your body that you avoid by getting wrapped up in the sensationalism that we keep serving each of us. Now, it turns out there's a very nice, like little piece of, in my mind, it's game theory. It's a bit of a mathematician. I see the system in a lot of detail, and I can recognize that the incentive structures need to be just so. It so happens that even if you do this alone on your own, it is to your personal benefit. There's a kind of hump to get past as you deal with the fakeness of your own relationships and your ways of living your life. And I think that keeps happening over and over again. But your life gets better. You feel better in your own skin. You live your life. You come to recognize what it is that you truly want, and you come to receive what you truly desire much more easily. This is not just some vague mystical thing. Although it may sound vague and mystical, even the truth may sound vague and mystical before you actually encounter it. It is a very grounded, practical thing along the lines of if you're tired all the time, the chances are very good it's because you are of the share of we's trauma that you are carrying in your body and has exhausted you to the point that your body shuts down. There are probably some exceptions, but this is so overwhelmingly common that if you have difficulty with having enough energy to do the things that you want, it's because of this. Almost guaranteed. Almost. So if you want more energy, you can choose to purge yourself of we's madness. You can choose to remember, to feel your grounding in the flow of time. So this is personally helpful to you. And that's part of why it can help to sober up the we. No, I think many people, like if I imagine myself even 5 years ago listening to this, it'd be this question of, okay, so what are you saying to do concretely? Like I don't, even if I just agree with everything, what would I do? I don't know if I agree, but like, okay, what's, okay. So I can speak to that a little bit. The most, so if, on a very simple level, if you just, as stupid as it sounds, this sounds irrelevant because the part of the truth we've been ignoring can actually feel kind of boring because it's not sensational. And boredom is a sign that the mind gives that you are at risk of noticing something that you've been trying to distract yourself from. In adults, in children, it tends to be different. And there's a form of boredom that can show up in adults that is like the children's boredom. But almost all cases of boredom I encounter in adults are this. So it's not going to seem very glamorous. It's not going to seem very much like this can possibly do anything. But it is absolutely a foundation. Right now, as you're listening, can you feel your feet? You probably can now. Do you notice you're in a room or in some space? Maybe you're outside, but like there's a space between your face and the screen. And the screen is in the physical context of your body. Can you maintain awareness of this loosely while being engaged with what you're focused on? When you think thoughts, can you notice how you're thinking thoughts from in a body? Can you feel your feet? I'm not saying don't think. I'm not saying turn off your mind. I'm saying notice you're here. Excuse me. Notice you're right here. You don't have to think about it. You're just noticing the true fact that you're right here. When washing dishes, folding clothes, can you feel what you're doing? It doesn't mean focus meditatively on it and quiet all the thoughts. You can if you want to, but at least you can try. Most people can't. But it's a very simple, grounded thing. Like there's a thing the mind does so fast of, yeah, I can feel my feet. So, and like 5 seconds later, you're not feeling your feet anymore. You aware of your elbows? Or the sensation of your eyes in your face? Some people are going to have that very acute because the eyes get achy, like looking at the screen for too long. Many kids do. But it's very, very simple. It's very grounded. So it seems like, how could this possibly matter? I could give some philosophy. I don't want to right now. But philosophy doesn't matter. This is grounding in truth and orienting you to where all the sensations happen. For many people, trying to do this is an impossible task. Their trauma systems are too strong. There's too much energy, uh, uh, trapped survival energy or stored survival energy, as Irene Lyon likes to refer to. So you may find that you can't do this. Trying to do so actually makes you freak out more, or it makes you more tired, or it makes you fog out, or you just keep forgetting about it. So the core thing to do here is finding a place in your body that feels a little less threatening, a little less terrible than the rest of it. Ideally, a place that feels neutral, possibly even good. Something like your earlobes. For most people, their earlobes don't have any particular sensation to it, and it's impossible to put tension there. Hat tip to Luis Mojica for this example. He's a somatic experiencing practitioner. So is Irene Lyon, the person I mentioned earlier. But if you just feel your earlobes, if it's not your earlobes, you can find any other place of your body that feels kind of neutral, sort of hanging, easy. If you bring attention there and you notice, hey, I feel a little safe right there. Maybe that's all you can do, but that's enough. So building this foundation of embodied safety. This is the starting point. This is like saying, look, we need to get to the top of Everest. So the thing to do is to move one foot forward and place it in front of the other and shift your weight. Step your right foot forward and shift. This doesn't answer the whole question of how we do the whole ascent. It doesn't answer all the important questions about what to do when you encounter major challenges, but it is literally the first step. It sounds so stupid, it's so simple, it's very boring in a kind of way. That's the mind babbling. That's the copy of we, the piece of we that has infected the mind and is controlling attention. The aim here is an invitation to reclaim responsibility for your attention and bring it home. Home. I'll have plenty to say about more things about memory, about being in time, feeling the actual flow of time, what's true, what's real here. Some of these steps of embodiment. This is the work. We don't get this right, we die. That's simple. It's not a threat, it's just a fact. So as far as I'm concerned, this is the thing worth really talking about. I'll probably talk about other things too, because enjoyment and being this human is also very important, and it's part and parcel to the whole thing. And this human likes a whole bunch of stuff. So I'll probably keep speaking about many of those. But this is the one, like if I point at one piece, right here. Sober up or die. Are you listening, Lee? Probably not. But at least you, sovereign angelic soul, one watching this video, you, not everyone, you, can you feel the truth of what I'm talking about? That's all that matters. Feel that truth. Notice how it's in your body. That's why you're here. You're here to remember. And by embodied example, teach and hold we to remember, to become sober, to become lucid, to become kind, sane. If this really rings with you and you super want some guidance, I have a program. I'm not going to go into it right now. I want to wrap this up. And I have a space where I do my best to encourage people to develop these skills to the best of my ability, hiking up at Everest, guiding people through that process. Not that I know best, but that I'm several steps ahead of many people. And that several steps ahead means that I can say, hey, when I took this path, this bit here is a little easier to traverse this way. Or, hey, from my vantage point, I see what I think is going to be the easiest path for you. I don't know, you're you. Here's what I see in case that's helpful to you. This is a lot more powerfully transformative than you might think. But the important part here is not, hey, look at the sensation, intense transformation. No, right? Sometimes intensity happens, but it's very slow, methodical work. It's profound because it's real. Okay. So if that appeals to you, the program is called Mage. You can find out about it either by PMing me or by looking at my profile. If you look at my profile, there's a link to the page, mages.mn.co. It's held on Mighty Networks, so MN for Mighty Networks. mages.mn.co. You can go there to fill out an application if you like. No pressure. I'm not interested in pressing anybody with this stuff. But if you can feel what I'm doing and you can feel that I might be able to hold space for you as you lean into this kind of clarity, if you feel called, feel free to reach out. Okay. I'm here to serve this. So if you want that evoked in you, I think I can help. Feel free to reach out. Yeah, I think that's enough. Thanks for listening. It's quite a long one.